Welcome, everybody, to the Soul of the Unexplained. As always, I am your host, Jim Kelgard. And with me is my always awesome Mr. Roger Stokes, of course, the co creator and co host of the Soul of the Unexplained. How are you doing today, Roger?
Doing very well, Jim. Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here and speak with our fantastic viewers as well as you. Jim, how has your week been?
Oh gosh, it's been kind of crazy, and that's why, folks. If you were expecting us to post the season five in 5 minutes or less, this week was kind of crazy, and the main reason was my birthday was on Monday, and then my son's birthday was on Wednesday, which of course is the day when we'd usually try to record these quick recaps of the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch season five. So that's why we're doing it today. That's why there's a little bit of a delay. But Roger, I did survive my birthday. I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'm uh, I'm well over 50. Let's put it that way.
Jim, listen, I think our viewers deserve to know the truth. You're not a day over 25.
Well,
It's
okay, that's true. I'm 19 and a half.
it's
But
true. It's true. I don't know if you guys know this, but Jim doesn't talk about it much, but he actually traversed a portal that made him 19 and a half years old. And okay, just kidding. If Jim had actually traversed a portal, listen, I don't think we'd be having this podcast. Jim and I, we'd probably be in some secret government facility, but that's a story for another day. So,
as long as we're back in 1985 or 84 or gosh, 86 was a good year for music too. I'd be okay with 86, but yeah. Anyhow, folks, we are going to recap. That's what we're here today to do. We're going to recap episode number two of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which, of course, is called Holy Cow. And because of how complicated this particular episode is and how many different facets to the phenomenon that are covered in this particular episode, we're going to go a little bit longer than 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to go a lot longer than 5 minutes. We're not going to do quite a full episode, one of our 2 hour conversations on this, folks, but we are going to dive in right now and start talking about this episode. Roger, before we get started, what's just kind of your overall impression of this second episode of season five of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch?
well, the second episode really excited me a lot. It left me asking more questions than giving me answers, right? I'll think that and I don't know, I'm really excited to discuss it. It kind of the evidence that they caught and tied in from last year, especially around these main experiments with the 1.6 gigahertz um, broadcasting that they've done, and just some of the flyovers, and phenomenally, just what amazed me is just the amount of UAP activity that they dug up there that they found. Like it's incredible. I really am excited to dig into this because I think what they're showing, some of the experiments, which I'm grateful for, seem to be repeated, right, in just a little bit different ways. And it continues to, poke that hornet's nest, as Dr. Taylor likes to say. And we're starting to see a lot of the, similar activity with the UAPs. But overall, a very exciting, great way to start out the first of this week. And I can't wait for next week's episode. But Jim, what were your thoughts?
Well, mine were pretty well similar to yours, Roger. The thing that impresses me the most about the way that season five of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch has started is that there seems to be a much more focused approach to everything that the team out there at the ranch are doing. I love how
Yeah.
last week they hit the ground running, as it were, or they, I mean that excuse me, folks, that whole experiment with the two helicopters and the the results of the experiment they got there are just you know fantastic and exciting stuff. And then this week, again, just when I think that there's not going to be any more way that they could possibly throw some curveballs at us with the results of the experiments that they are doing, um, it happens, and that's kind of how I was with this episode, and that's why we're going a bit longer than 5 minutes on this one. So to
Yeah,
get
so
started,
much.
folks. So yeah, I was super impressed with this episode, and I like how there are so many new questions that are now in my mind regarding the things that we saw unfold in episode two, and that kind of seems how it tends to be, as just kind of like it's kind of the what we come to expect with the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, right? I mean, just when we think we're getting close to an answer, we get more and more questions that pop up. And for me, that's not frustrating. For me, that's just exciting because it shows me that, even though they're learning and they're getting more data, it just shows truly how complex and multifaceted this mystery, this secret, if you will, of Skinwalker Ranch really is. And as we've talked about in the past, Roger, it's a rabbit hole that I love going down. And so, what do you say we dive in to this rabbit hole regarding episode two?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And before we do that, I just wanted to, because I was thinking about this this past week, Jim. But for better or worse, in the UAP community and the things that we're doing with our podcast, I've just noticed that especially now that we're into season 5 of Skinwalker Ranch, right? The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Sometimes there's a lot of negativity around, and this is what I wanted to address, just that, like, oh, it's each season, well, why haven't they found like this portal? Where's that wormhole? Where's that evidence? Why haven't, you know, whether it's aliens or why haven't they just ripped out the mesa and gone down in there and see what's there? And I just quickly wanted to address that because, I think that there's going to be many more seasons of this, right? But this is a topic, this is not a show that you are just going to get instant gratification on. The way they collect the science and do that, this is an ongoing lifetime experiment, right? There's no way that in just the course of one season they're going to be like, okay, guys, we solved the world problem, and we have an active wormhole here. We got a portal. We know why all this stuff happens. That's just not realistically going to happen. And so, I've seen some frustration out there. It's like, well, why can't they just get this to happen? And right, I think every season they learn more and more and more. And to your point, Jim, everything's getting tightened up. They're focusing in. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of the high strangeness. But again, you guys just, I hope that if you're out there and you're seeing some negativity around that, don't let that get you down. That's the nature of these things. We enjoy it, but at the same time, the answers that we're looking for and really want to happen, it's going to take a while. And, I mean, beyond that, I just caution everybody not to, jump to too many conclusions, let the data come in. And, I'd still, once you see this, I'd still love everyone's opinions on, the UAP phenomenon. But I just wanted to address that because I have seen some negativity around that going into season 5. So, if don't let other people get you down. If you enjoy the show, continue to think about those theories and engage with the community.
Well said, Roger. And I would just remind folks, if you are a fan of the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, whether you're a Skinwalker Ranch insider or whether you're just a casual viewer of the show, understand two things. Number one, as Roger said, you have to have patience because we want to make sure that the data that this team is gathering has been able to have some kind of proper scientific method application done to the research. In other words, they're going to be looking for repeatable results. They're going to be looking to get things, peer reviewed and look at things on multiple sensor platforms and,
Yeah.
dot all the I's and cross all the T's, as it were. Excuse me. So for that fact alone, folks, you need to have patience. And I know that's hard to hear, and I know we all want the answer now in this modern age when we can have almost anything we want at the snap of a finger. Then but understand that good things and really this thing is not going to be finished like Roger says. It's not going to be built. It's not going to come out in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day, and we're kind of playing the long game here with the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch because we want we want the proper data to come out, and that takes time. And so just have patience and just stick with it, and just you know be grateful that we're able to have the glimpse that we do into what's going on with these amazing episodes. And I'm sure that nobody is more frustrated at not being able to give us more, concrete answers on this stuff than the gentlemen that are all out there doing the research at the ranch. So I once again applaud every member of the Skinwalker Ranch research team out there uh, for the work that they're doing, the time that they dedicate, and the fact that it's got to be in more ways than one a heavy burden for them to carry to be able to have to I'm sure that they want to tell us a lot of things and they just simply can't, either because of agreements that they have with the History Channel via their NDAs, or because they don't have sufficient data to say one way or the other. Their hypotheses haven't been completely verified or falsified. And so, because of that, they have to be careful with what they say because, if they're just, trying to be sensationalistic about it, then that's going to ruin the whole purpose for everything out there. And
Right.
thankfully, that's not the kind of team that we have, because the guys that we have out there, from Eric Bard, Travis Taylor, and Caleb and Dragon, and Jim Royston, Sam DeRizo, I mean, just everybody that's out there, Tom Winterton, they, they just give them time, have patience, and as Caleb likes to say, stay tuned. Right? We'll know. We'll find out.
Yep, absolutely.
Right on. Well, let's dive right in, folks. Again, episode 2 is called Holy Cow. And so we're going to kind of go by this point by point. And so the episode opens up with Eric, Travis, Dragon, Jim, Sam, and Caleb. And I think Thomas is there as well, reviewing the UAP footage from last week. And they say that they're looking. Eric says that they're looking for a relationship between two things, Roger. The first of which is the bright object observed close to or possibly on the ground by OP1. And for those of you that know what Minecraft is, that was the one that was kind of looked like the creeper from Minecraft.
Yep.
That Travis said it appeared to possibly be on the ground. And then the second one was the UAP filmed last season that appears to fly into the top of the mesa and reemerge from the bottom of it. And Eric says that both of those objects seem to be headed towards the triangle. Travis then says that the triangle area is where the most anomalous activity has occurred on the ranch, and that they really want to determine any possible connection between these presumed entry and exit points on the mesa. Sorry, folks. I need to drink more water. But Roger, so that was a phrase that kind of stood out to me, is that Travis said that the triangle is the area where the most anomalous activity has occurred on the ranch. And I know that there's some people out there that think that the area with the most anomalous activity is actually Homestead 2. And when I heard that, when Travis said that the triangle was actually the kind of like the epicenter of most of the anomalous activity, I thought that was kind of interesting. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I can't definitively say um, what would cause that, but I do think that when we talk about the triangle, and you look at all the other locations, such as Homestead too, like everything is connected through that triangle area on the ranch. And I think that I agree with Dr. Taylor in what we've been able to, or what we've been given and disseminated down to us as viewers and insiders. A lot of activity seems to stem around the triangle. And again, I'll go back to the quarter second loss of time, things there. When they're launching rockets up through there, they've seen the blob shape, the rockets being destroyed. And again, I really think, I remember the episode when I think it was last year or the previous year, but they were looking at that UAP, and Brandon was looking at it, and Eric and or Dr. Travis Taylor, and right, it was headed right over the triangle, and then it just vanished. So again, all those UAPs, I definitely agree that, and like I can't say definitively, like right, I can't say it's a wormhole or a portal, but it sure appears that way. And with what we learned last year, with the potential structures underneath the ranch there, whatever's in the sky and what's ever in the ground and what's ever through the mesa, they're all connected somehow, and that is the center point from what I feel, what I'm getting out of this. So,
I completely agree. Well said. So they determined that the point where the UAP from last season, this is the one that flew into the top of the mesa and seemingly then flew out of the bottom of the mesa,
right.
that it happened near the East Canyon part of the property. And Thomas then mentions how the petroglyph that some people allege depicts a portal is coincidentally located in the same eastern part of the mesa, and how there are also many stories about portals opening on the ranch and reports of objects flying into and out of the mesa. And folks, some of those reports go back farther than the time that Brandon Fugel purchased the property. So we're talking. There's reports of this going back to the times of not only the Bigelow era, but I would presume the time that the Shermans owned the ranch and the Myers before them, and possibly even long before then as well. So there's all kinds of stories of objects coming into and out of that mesa. And Thomas then says, quote, at this point, it's way more than a coincidence, close quote. And Travis then suggests that perhaps the mesa and the triangle are somehow connected. So Travis then proposes an experiment where one team goes to the east side of the mesa to broadcast a 1.6 gigahertz signal at or into the east side of the mesa facing the triangle, while the other team is going to be stationed at the triangle to see if the signal is received. Now, due to the long distance between the two locations, Eric's receiver should not be able to detect Travis's transmission. So if he does receive it, they say that could mean some kind of direct passageway through the solid rock mesa, like a portal may may be possible. So that's kind of what their purpose of wanting to conduct this particular experiment becomes. So from there, Roger, it shifts to they bring in. We then see Tom Lewis and Candace Lindy and Eric are welcoming a gentleman on the ranch by the name of Ben Woodruff. And Ben Woodruff is a biologist at the Hutchings Museum Institute, which is here in Utah. And they bring him on the ranch to examine some deceased bird carcasses that Tom and Candace and Eric believe are exhibiting unexpected rates of decomposition. And I don't know about you, Roger, but this is one particular aspect of the show that I just was not expecting. And I'm still kind of not sure. My head is still kind of spinning from it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it just seems that, and over the past seasons too, where we've had, these animals that have passed away, for whatever reason, the, I've been out in the woods. I've seen animal decay and things like that. It goes pretty fast, which what they described there is accurate. But things that are dying on the ranch don't experience that same type of decay. And I think that was, I mean, they've had multiple vets out there, and in this particular episode, that having an additional veterinarian taking the birds, it's just weird. Like it doesn't matter where you should be. It just kind of messes with your sense of perception of the world, right? All things being equal, the rate of decay and things like that on the ranch should be the same as if you're out in the woods or things like that. But for whatever reason, it's not. And there's something going on that's tied to that. I don't know if it's because of something underneath the ranch, something above it. Is it, who knows? But I do hope that they get more analysis on it. But again, my mind, it's just like I can't wrap myself around that. Like, what would literally cause that to not decay? There's so many predators out there. I mean, it's in literally Skinwalker Ranch is a cattle ranch. It's out there in the middle of nowhere. You've got the wild dogs, you've got bobcats that can come down. There's so many different things here in the Utah wilderness that could be on the ranch at any given time. And to have these things happen, it truly is one of those things that I can't explain. So I'm curious to hear what they get back from this gentleman.
I agree, Roger. And so Eric tells Ben about the cow that died mysteriously several months prior and how it and the other dead cow from season one were in seemingly good health when each one suddenly died, right? So Ben, after listening to the stories, mentions how it's strange how some things die and decompose normally on the ranch while others do not. And Candace then says it seems that something appears to be slowing down the natural decomposition process on the ranch. Ben is then shown the carcasses of two deceased birds. One of them is a grosbeak, and the other one is a starling. And he's asked if he can determine if the actual estimated time frame of the death of each bird matches each one's current state of decomposition and decay. So Ben takes a look at the grosbeak first. And Candace says that the grosbeak has been dead approximately 2 to 2.5 weeks, and that the starling had been dead for approximately 1 to maybe a week and a half. And neither bird, despite being dead for many days, shows any signs of scavenging or any maggots or worms or beetles that one would expect to find on an animal that has been dead and exposed to the sunlight and elements for a week or more. So that's one of the really trippy things, folks, is that there is no outward signs on either of these two dead birds of any kind of scavenging. I mean, usually within a very short period of time, when that animal is lying on the ground and it's dead, scavengers should be coming in to, make their move on that because nothing goes to waste in nature, right, Raj?
Right, that is
And
correct.
so the other thing, and I can tell you what little I do know about this topic, folks, because believe it or not, this is something that maybe even you don't know, Roger. But at one time, I actually contemplated a career as a mortician. I know, creepy as all get out. But so I studied for a brief period of time some of the things that that go into that particular field, and one of them is there's a field called thanatochemistry, which deals with the chemistry regarding death and how things decompose. The process known as putrefaction, which is how a deceased body decays. And so all that kind of stuff. And what I can tell you, folks, is that when a human being or an animal dies, their cells begin breaking down immediately. So, from internally in particular, it's just once the circulation of blood and the oxygen to the brain, I mean, once all those things cease, the cells automatically begin breaking down or decaying. And more specifically, they develop what is commonly known as rigor mortis, right? And so Ben talks about how the sun there at Skinwalker Ranch, and remember this is kind of in the summertime that we're talking, maybe around this time, Roger, May or June, we don't know specifically, but definitely late spring, early summer. And so he talks about how the sun there at Skinwalker Ranch, within a week of death, starts to break down the follicle where the feather attaches, and the feathers start to just come out. And that particular process hasn't happened on either bird. And remember, Roger, you've got one bird that's been dead for possibly 2.5 weeks that's out there in the sun. And you have another bird that's been dead for at least a week, week and a half. And that particular process of the follicles that attach the feathers does not appear to have been broken down.
Right.
So he then examines the starling and sees no evidence of maggots or dermestid beetles at all. and he notes that despite being dead for at least a full week, the starling's muscle tissue is what? Squishy. And particularly, not only is it squishy, but the keel bone is intact. So he determines that nothing has eaten the inside of the bird. In other words, you can see it on the show. I mean, he's pressing down where the viscera and where the internal organs of that bird would be, and it's still squishy. There is no evidence of rigor mortis, and that's really bizarre. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those classic signs and things and symptoms of decay should have been there, but they're not. And again, I think that, and it's something that we could probably even discuss in another episode of our podcast, but what what could do that? What potentially and this is just a completely random thought, but I think back to the 2018 film by Jeremy Corbell and that the hunt for the Skinwalker. And they concluded Colin Kelleher when I think it was Terry Sherman. Basically, there was a calf out in the field. They tagged it. About 30, 45 minutes had passed. They were down further in the field. The dog got all crazy. They went back and they had found that the calf had been completely mutilated. There was no evidence of blood, precision surgical things. And the one thing that they had concluded based on that is that the only possible way is that the cow was taken to some place where they drained the blood, did all the instruments, things, and then came back and displayed the cow out. So, is that something, if that actually did happen, is that something that maybe happens to these animals or something like that, where that process of whatever they're going through changes because of whether they did go through a portal, whether they were taken elsewhere through whatever means or whatever contributed to their death changes their biology enough to slow down that decaying. So I don't know. It's just another weird thing that happens at Skinwalker Ranch.
Excellent question, Roger. And we've seen a lot of people, particularly on the Skinwalker Ranch Insider website. There's a lot of people that are bringing up, hey, is this the fact that the decomposition rate seems to be slowed down? Is that potentially a side effect of some kind of time dilation or time
Right?
slippage, or like you said, Roger, if there is in fact, and again, folks, it's a big if. Nobody has said definitively that there is portals on the ranch, and we'll get to that in just a moment. So be patient. But if there is, in fact, portals or some kind of mechanism that momentarily these creatures are, pass through this naturally or whatever it is, these phenomena appear, and whatever it is that happens to them happens, and then they end up back in the current, timeline, for want of a better word, and we just don't know. But again, it's one of those things, like you said, Roger, adds another layer to that mystery, and you know, things to make you go, hmm,
Hmm. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So Ben then says that the starling should be either a mummy or rotting. And what he means by that is that because the climate of where Skinwalker Ranch is very dry, and the amount of time, they should already start to be desiccating, which means that the corpses are starting to dry out. Or they should be just flat out rotting, right? Because again,
Right.
exposure to the sun, exposure to the elements, and it's neither. It's neither a mummy or is it rotting. But the brain on the starling, oddly enough, is completely gone. And the grosbeak shows a lot of blood around the beak, but both eyes are intact. The keel bone and viscera, like the starling, are still intact. And Ben says that those are the first things to decompose because of the soft tissue. Like the starling, the that whole body area of the grosbeak is still squishy, despite being dead for at least a week longer than the starling. So Ben says that the heat alone should have dried out the corpses and stiffened them. Again, rigor mortis. And the rigor mortis doesn't appear to have set in on either bird. The tissue hasn't dried out and the collagens have not started to break down. Again, this is all a mystery, folks. Ben says, quote, why do you have an animal that's been dead for so long that's still soft and squishy? Close quote, right? And that is the big question. He says that you should have a fox, a cat, or a coyote that should have already picked away or outright eaten either one of those birds by now. Yet no signs of scavengers on either of the bird corpses. Why aren't the scavengers doing their job? That's a very, very legitimate question to be asking. So that kind of wraps up and ties up the bit with the birds, Roger. And Eric and Candace and Tom then take Ben out to where that cow was in the field that passed away. And after 6 months, there's still soft tissue left on the bones, as well as the stomach and other organs. And Eric reiterates that they still don't know how that particular cow passed away. And Ben then points out large tooth puncture marks on the ribs, on the rib bones and scapula of the skeleton of this cow. And he says that the animal that left the bite marks had to be larger than like a coyote or a wolf to have dragged an entire carcass, you know, to where they found some of the bits of the skeleton. And what's interesting to note, Roger, is that one bite mark completely perforated, like perfectly perforated one of the thickest parts of one of the rib bones. And Ben says that he's not aware of any known predator animal in Utah capable of inflicting such damage with its teeth. And the thing to remember, folks, is that while all predator animals, including dogs, have canine teeth, the big, the fangs that we always hear talking about. When if you have a dog and you've ever fed your dog a bone, they don't go after it with their canine teeth. And what they do is they put it in their mouth and they use their molars to kind of grind away at it, which is exactly, when humans chew food, we also chew and grind with our molars as well. So assuming that this, whatever it was that this predator animal was that went after the cow, presumably after it had already died, what would have been strong enough to completely perforate? Okay, I mean, you could actually look through the bone and see daylight. It was that much of a perforation. And Ben says that he was not aware of any predator animal in Utah that would have been able to do that. And like you said earlier, Roger, out there on the ranch, they do have mountain lions. They do have bears that are in that general region where Skinwalker Ranch is. We know they have coyotes, and we know that there are packs of wild dogs or res dogs, as they call them out in that area, because Skinwalker Ranch is bordered on pretty much every side by Ute reservation land. So that kind of ties up the whole bit with the animals, Roger. And I'm not really sure what to make of it. There are some insiders that have said, well, particularly where the one bird is missing like the whole, practically the whole
The
crown of its
brain, yeah.
head and the
Yeah.
brain is all gone. There are some people that say, well, it could have been a gunshot. Maybe somebody shot it. And while I would not rule that out as a possibility, um, one thing I do have to say about that is that I grew up in upstate New York, a very rural area of upstate New York. I did a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing as a kid. I spent a lot of time outdoors. I love the outdoors. And so I was raised around firearms, and I even shot competitively target shooting when I was a teenager. So I can tell you, folks, when you go bird hunting, not many people go bird hunting with anything other than a shotgun. And there's a reason for that. Because birds are almost always on the move. They're either flying or, they're just they don't tend to sit still very often. And another thing, if you ever notice birds, what are their heads always doing, Roger? They're always,
They're always moving around, looking
it's
right
like
for
it's
predators
yeah,
and things.
and
And yeah,
their heads are very animated. So the damage that is on this one bird's head does not appear to me to be inflicted by a shotgun, because there just doesn't, it doesn't seem to be the type of injury inflicted by a shotgun. which
well, and
means which means okay, if it's a pistol, something like a 22, or even a larger caliber. Talk about overkill. If you're going shooting birds with a 357 or a 45 or a 38 or you know 44 Magnum.
well, and I would even imagine that at the ranch there, like uh, if especially Eric, who's there all the time, Dragon, their security, Caleb, if if anything, if there were shots fired, people using guns and things like that, I think that that would have been disclosed, right? I think that the biggest thing is they don't want to use those weapons on the ranch, right? It is there for a defensive purpose. So I just don't see any of the people out there, especially the security, who are, carrying their firearms out there just targeting creatures just for the heck of it, right? Like that doesn't make sense to me. So is it possible that that bird was shot by a gun? Yes, anything's possible. But just from what I know of, like bullet wounds and things like that, does not appear to be anything like that. So
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
strange.
it does not. And the other thing, folks, to be able to get a headshot, specifically get a headshot, and to take off the crown of the head of a bird. Or again, remember, folks, bird heads don't sit still. Bird heads are probably the
You
most animated thing on a bird's
you got to
body.
be one good shot,
Yeah,
and I mean
I
that's
mean,
just
yeah, that's again out of the realm of possibility. Of course not, but is it likely? I don't think so. It's a very unlikely uh, scenario that particularly that bird missing the
yeah.
significant portion of the top of its head where its brain is completely gone. I don't think that was inflicted by a firearm. Um, if you want to have some fun with it, folks, there's a lot of people that are saying, well, maybe, if you want to get into the conspiracy aspect of it here, some people wonder if maybe there was some kind of directed energy weapon of some kind.
Yeah.
Whatever the phenomena is on the ranch, why it would target a bird of all creatures is anybody's guess. But maybe we've seen history of potentially, maybe Thomas when he had the incident that happened before season one, where he had the his scalp separated from his skull. There's some people that think that that may have been the result of a directed energy weapon of some kind that hit Thomas, that caused that injury on Thomas. So if we have something like that, a record of something like that that may have been in play when Thomas was injured, then maybe it's also up for consideration, at least as a you know just kind of spitballing here, that maybe that's what happened to this one bird, right? Who
Right.
knows?
Yeah.
So so again, folks, interesting stuff that took place with those animals, and uh, it was kind of cool to see that Ben, who was a biologist, even he didn't know what was going on. And another thing that I do have to say, folks, is as far as we know, nobody shot the cow either. There was no evidence to suggest that that cow died as a result of a gunshot. And even after it was dead, there's no evidence that we're aware of that the perforation on that rib was necessarily caused by a firearm. Uh, does that rule it out? Of course not. But I agree with you, Roger. I think that if that had been the case, I think that uh, they would have said something on the program, because that's just how the folks on the ranch are about wanting to be as forthcoming and transparent as they can.
For sure.
Uh, if they knew that, I'm sure that would have been included. And we haven't heard anything from the team indicating that that cow was ever shot. So I'm just going to close the door on that and say that cow
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
never shot either post mortem or while it was alive. So,
Yeah, 100%. And I think if they had to put an animal down or something for whatever reason, to make sure that, the animal wasn't suffering or take care of it in a humane way, it wouldn't even been on the episode, right? They wouldn't have said, "Oh, take a look at this," right? That's not what they're there for, right? And so
mhm,
they do want to take a look at, what is really going on. So, yeah, I agree. Shut the door on that. It's not it's not a gunshot there. So
absolutely. Alrighty, so the next day, the experiment begins with the signal experiment. So Thomas and Jim, Sam and Dragon and Eric, they set up a little experiment station out by the triangle and set up a receiver, while Travis and Caleb set up a transmitting station with a spectrum analyzer and high speed camera over at the east end of the mesa. Now, speaking of Jim, and of course, this is Jim Royston, not Jim Morse, but Jim Royston with Omnitech. And remember, folks, Omnitech are now, thankfully, I'm really excited about this. Omnitech are maintaining a permanent presence at Skinwalker Ranch. And so Jim of Omnitech launches a LiDAR drone equipped with a GPS to fly back and forth between the presumed entry and exit points of this anomaly to search for any possible anomalies that might be unseen by the human eye during the experiment. Now, Eric very clearly states it should not be possible for him to detect a signal sent through solid rock. If the experiment does show Eric receiving a signal, it would constitute the first clue that there is indeed some kind of passageway or some kind of mechanism, a wave guide or something like that,
to
through the
amplify it.
mesa,
Yeah.
where exactly where the UAP was seen flying in and out from last year. Now, really interesting to note, Rogers, that before the experiment even begins, Travis begins hearing this audible noise, like an electronic warbling of sorts. And so, as soon as he opens his laptop, he can then see a signal being broadcast in the area right around that 1.6 gigahertz range. And what's really kind of surprising is that Travis says it appears to be a two-way communication, possibly encrypted. Eric, however, cannot detect the signal from his location near the triangle. That's this unknown anomalous signal that's already broadcasting around that 1.6 gigahertz before they even begin the experiment. So Eric observes so then what happens is they send Jim's drone up on a test run, and the drone is on an automated path at a height of 300 feet, flying back and forth between the two mesa points. And interesting to note, Roger, is that its signal gets interrupted and the battery drains and has to fly back to base. It gets that RTH, the return to home uh, message that those high end drones, that once their battery gets to a certain point, they automatically will return
Right.
to their launch point. And so Eric, of course, is tracking all this while the drone is in flight, and he observes a noticeable gap in the drone's GPS data at approximately the same spot where Pete Kelsey's photogrammetry drone detected the 300-foot spire-like anomaly 2 years prior. And I don't know about you, Roger, but for me, that was a serious holy shit moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you look at that and I mean, that's just not a coincidence. So there's something, I mean, these things are being like, we're on the precipice here of all this data coming together to be able to draw some, I'd say, pretty specific conclusions, right? And so I love the fact, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this, is that because that was the test flight, right? Let's see if we can get some repeatability here.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so the 1.6 signal suddenly appeared on Travis's spectrum analyzer as the drone was then flying into that Spire anomaly area. And the signal disappeared, that 1.6 little signal disappeared as soon as the drone flew out of the Spire area. And they get the drone operational again once it lands back, and I'm assuming they replace the battery and they send it back up, and then they tell Travis to go ahead and start broadcasting his 1.6 gigahertz signal into the mesa towards Eric. Now, as soon as Travis begins transmitting, Eric detects a signal. He then asks Travis to stop the transmission, and then immediately sees the signal disappear once Travis gives the indication that he has ceased broadcasting. Eric confirms that they are picking up Travis turning the signal on and off, and the signal is undeniably, or so it appears, transmitting through the mesa. Eric states that the transmitter that Travis is using is not strong enough to be detected at the distance separating the two of them. And again, Roger, they're separated by, you know, by a fairly significant distance. Remember, folks, this is a big ranch. This is really a large property, and I don't have the specific distance, but I want to say it's probably pushing a quarter mile, if not maybe a little bit longer than a quarter
Right.
mile distance between where Travis and Eric are. And because of the curvature of the mesa from where Travis is and how the mesa kind of curves, my understanding is there's not exactly direct line of sight either, which is another consideration to take into account
Right.
regarding this signal.
Yeah, it's in the East Canyon, kind of behind the mesa there, and so it was trying to transmit through there, right? And if that mesa is solid rock and the capacity of the equipment to generate that signal, it's not a, I mean, you saw it, it's a small device, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, definitely we could look into that more and just see kind of the specs and bandwidth. But as Eric stated and Travis as well, like that should not, based on the distance and what they understand the mesa to be, like that 1.6 gigahertz signal should not be able to be picked up by Eric over the triangle there.
precisely, exactly. So Jimm resumes the LiDAR drone scan across the mesa points and once again experiences GPS glitches. And while the drone is seen ascending vertically when it takes off, the GPS data shows it flying or kind of drifting off to the south instead of going straight up. Meanwhile, you have all these eyewitnesses that say, nope, we saw that drone. It went straight up, straight,
Right.
what is that? A 90-degree angle, straight up, right? And so, again, flying to the south. And the GPS data shows a gap once again at that Spire anomaly location. The drone then inexplicably begins flying in circles as it experiences more signal interference. And as it recalibrates, it then finally returns to Jimm and Eric. So Travis then ceases transmission and they conclude the experiment. So the really interesting stuff, Roger, happens the next day after Eric has had a chance to analyze the data from Jimm's LiDAR drone. And so he gathers the team together there at the command center, Eric does. And after applying a special filter to the video footage, Eric shows how several UAPs appeared in the sky during the experiment. And all of the UAPs were not visible to the naked eye. So that's worth taking note of. The UAPs do not appear to be birds or insects. They're moving incredibly fast. Now, has it been completely ruled out that they're not birds or insects? No. But the data does not seem to show any presence of wing flap or anything like that. So, one UAP that is observed is thin and elongated and appears to fly directly into the base of the mesa. And that particular UAP was, to me, Roger, anyway, very reminiscent of what the footage was when they were flying Cameron's helicopter around in season three, was it, where the proximity radar for on Cameron's helicopter said you're only 40 feet off of the ground when in fact they were a lot higher than 40 feet, and it was presumably something was flying underneath them. And then they went and looked at the images after that particular helicopter flight, and sure enough, you can see something really thin, kind of elongated, flying directly underneath
underneath them. Yeah.
Cameron's helicopter. So Eric then shows footage of four distinct UAPs flying in different patterns in relative close proximity to each other and at great speed. One of the objects appears to be rectangular in shape, dark on the top and light on the bottom. And Travis confirms that neither he or Caleb actually saw the objects despite having eyes on the area. In other words, these UAPs, these objects were completely invisible to them, to the naked eye. The final UAP seems to come out of nowhere, descends rapidly, changes direction momentarily, and appears to be making a final approach as if it were coming in for a landing near the triangle. And Travis says that they are gathering data and evidence that just might show that some of the legends told throughout the years about Skinwalker Ranch might be true after all. And Travis finishes the episode by saying he wonders how the application of science to figure out what these things are and why they're here, he wonders how our perception of reality could be changed forever. And that essentially ties up the episode, folks. So before Roger and I wrap this one up, Roger, I want to talk real briefly about these four UAPs that they showed there toward the end of the episode. And I know that you've read the Hunt for the Skinwalker book by George Knapp and Colin Kelleher.
Yep.
I know that you've also read the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which also has was kind of a collaboration between George Knapp and Colm Kelleher and Dr. Jim Lakatsky as well. And I know that, like me, Roger, you have studied the history of Skinwalker Ranch extensively. So, one of the things that stands out to me about these four UAPs that appeared was the shape of them. And there are several accounts in the days before Brandon Fugel took possession of the ranch of UAPs that were not at all what we would call aerodynamic in shape. In fact, some of them were referred to as being almost like a flying refrigerator, right?
Yeah.
And so, folks, you think of what a refrigerator looks like, and it's boxy, it's rectangular. So there are reports and also reports outside of Skinwalker Ranch of UAPs that have a very what we would consider a non-aerodynamic shape to them. Ryan Graves, his flight group out in the Atlantic, talks about the cube, the flying cube that was inside a sphere. Um, Cubes are not aerodynamic, Roger, and
No, no, they're
neither
not.
neither are refrigerators, and any a lot of these objects that we're told people are seeing. Um, Now we didn't get a clear high definition video of these four UAPs, but they certainly seem to have that rectangular kind of shape to them. We have no idea, at least they haven't given us any idea on what the dimensions of these UAPs might be. But again, the very similar characteristics of them flying very fast, making sudden movements that shouldn't be possible. Um, so, what are your thoughts on that, Roger? About how I like how Travis ended this episode by saying, you know, there's so many legends and so many stories, so many myths about Skinwalker Ranch that on the surface, any reasonable, rational person may just simply toss out and say, well, that's just hooey and nonsense, right? But we're beginning to see that maybe we shouldn't be so, you know, intent on throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. There seems to be reason to take further examination of some of these long-standing stories and myths and legends about anomalous phenomena that people have claimed to see flying into and out of the mesa, and just all kinds of things, whether it be portals, whether it be actual skinwalkers themselves, uh, some of the accounts of extinct creatures appearing on the ranch at various times. Um, Again, it just kind of deepens the mystery. And now that we're actually getting repeatable results on some of these experiments, it kind of, like we said in the beginning, Roger, it just kind of adds another layer of questions and mystery. It's like, okay, wow, did we really just see that? And, again, put yourself in the shoes of the gentlemen that are working out at the ranch and what that oh shit factor must be like for them. Uh, it just blows my mind to think about it, really. How about you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's great that I mean, we've talked about this before. And so as I think about like what I want to say here is, and the ranch, there's definitely, it feels like there's a sentience there. And that it's just not one sentience, but there are multiple things going on there. And it's kind of like that knowledge, right? You have certain knowledge, you start building upon that, right? And once you're okay with that, right? It seems that the intelligence or whatever there gives you another morsel, right? And so you continue to do that. And I think this is what's happening here is that we're starting to see that it's whatever's on the ranch is allowing some of this repeatability, right? And to get further vision into, these UAPs. What that means, I don't know, but it's really exciting for me because now they're able to start repeating some of this stuff and getting some of the same phenomena, which is exciting. Now, I don't know if, because of the Bigelow era, things were pretty tight-lipped, but it was said that after the government was there, the activity there dropped down and they weren't able to repeat a lot of it. The experiments because whatever was there would change things on them. And so what they thought they could do to get a response, it didn't happen. And I think that there's been a breakthrough on that. It's taken a while, but I think that more people with this knowledge are curiouser than ever. And so we're starting to see the repeatability of these things, and we're starting to see glimpses of like, oh, this, like Travis said, with the myths, the legends, and what people have seen throughout history there, not only here, but throughout the world, right? We're starting to see some of this from a scientific perspective, and it's exciting for me. I can't explain why the orbs, or not the orbs, but the UAP, why they're rectangular, why some are extremely elongated out. But it is like it really makes me excited to see what else that they have captured because we are starting to get more and more evidence that it's not just myth, it's not just legend. Things that we cannot explain through modern science and things that we've been told can't or shouldn't happen are actually happening, and we're seeing it real time. They're collecting the data, and it's exciting.
It is an exciting time, and I say it every time. I'm just grateful that I'm here to watch it all unfold and to be a spectator watching it all happen, because I do believe that there really is extraordinary things happening out there at Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
And neither you, Roger, or myself are going to ever make a judgment call and say, no question, it's interdimensional intelligence. It's
Right.
interdimensional beings. Oh, it's ETs, it's aliens, or it's all some, secret government, black op. unacknowledged special access program kind of type thing. I think that it's far too complex of an issue. The nature of the phenomena, there are so many aspects to it. It's just impossible to say definitively, and not even definitively, even conditionally, what any of these things are. And that's why the need to be patient, going through all the data, mining the data, doing uh, cross-checking it, getting it peer reviewed whenever they can by other credentialed scientists, physicists, botanists, biologists, anthropologists, what have you, um, to figure out this mystery. And the reality is, folks, we may never get all the answers. But what I do believe about Skinwalker Ranch is that, number one, it is very real. Whatever it is, it's real. I believe that the team that is out there is the right team to have out there. We could not ask for a
Yeah,
better team. And I also believe that with patience and believing in this team, I believe that we will get more of a, for want of a better term, disclosure from this group of researchers out at Skinwalker Ranch than we will from our own government pertaining to some of the mysteries that are out there regarding UAPs, UFOs, what have you.
agreed, 100%.
I think as Brandon Fugel recently said in his interview with Ross Coulthart, which I recommend to everybody to check out, he also believes that disclosure is going to come a lot faster from the private sector, and it's going to be more trustworthy and more sincere when it comes from the private sector than the government ever will, because you're going to have warring factions. You already have. I mean, that's just the nature of our government. They're at war with each other, philosophically and culturally and otherwise.
Yeah,
And the way that you break through that is by putting your confidence and putting your trust, and I'm going to use that word because I do trust the folks out there at Skinwalker Ranch, putting
yeah, I
your
agree.
confidence and your trust in them to bring that information forward. And it's going to take time, folks. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen this season or next season or whenever. But I guarantee you, if something big does happen, trust me, this is the group of individuals that you want to bring it out to the world. And I firmly believe that. And again, I'm just grateful to be along for the ride. Roger, this episode was amazing. And I know we wanted to do another quick 5 minute recap on it. But again, as you can see, folks, there were so many layers to peel back here. Not taking the time to do that, I feel, would have been a disservice uh, to everything that this podcast, The Soul of the Unexplained, is about. And I have to reiterate, folks, if you would like to see an additional, even more in depth analysis of this episode, please go check out the J Free 906 podcast, which is done by our very dear friend, Mr. Jeff Freeman. And his J Free 906 podcast is right here on YouTube. Look for it, J Free 906. And Jeff does some amazing work with recapping the episodes for Skinwalker Ranch. And if you like The Curse of Oak Island, there is no better podcaster out there covering The Curse of Oak Island than Mr. Jeff Freeman. So check out Jeff, his Skinwalker Ranch. He recaps episodes every week, just like we do. We are going to try to go back to doing a much shorter, quicker, more concise recap next week, folks. But every now and then we may have to go a little more deeper in our analysis like we did with this one. So here we are already approaching the hour mark. Thank you for dealing with us and having patience with us and watching us. And again, a major tip of the hat to all of our subscribers and to all the folks that have been watching the last couple of videos that we put out. We've had so many views, and we are so appreciative. So please, if you haven't, folks, and you like what you see and like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button down there, and we'll be happy to continue bringing you great content regarding Skinwalker Ranch and all matters of the unexplained. And again, thank you to everybody that wished me a happy birthday this year. I kind of don't generally don't like my birthday because I don't like the reminder that I'm getting older and uglier. But I had a great birthday spent with my family and my loved ones. And yes, I did have tacos and all kinds of great stuff to make my day special. So thank you everybody that took the time to wish me happy birthday. So Roger, any closing remarks? Any closing thoughts? Closing remarks?
No, just thank you again, everybody, for taking the time to watch this. If you like our content and you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe, hit that button down below. And we will be back next week. I'm super excited about next week's episode of Skinwalker Ranch. And, I hope everyone that watches this, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And yeah, enjoy yourself, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you guys next week.
All righty. Thanks, Roger. And folks, we will see you next week right here on the Soul of the Unexplained. See ya.